Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Thank you so much for coming in the inclement weather to the great Elmont Public Library. Isn't this a beautiful library?
Yes.
So thankful for this library. I would like to thank my staff, Marianne, Dan, for helping to put this event together. I would like to thank everyone who's here, all of the participating organizations, and our great MC, Dr. Lisa Newland of the Nassau Suffolk Association of Black Social Workers and a professor at Moonlight College, for helping to be a participant in this, for being a participant in this event and being the MC for the second time in a row. And I've enjoyed a great professional relationship with you where we discuss issues that are pertinent in our community. I would like to first begin with a Pledge of Allegiance. I say that despite the divisions we see in race, ethnicity, sex, class, whether you believe that they're on a rise, I think that this is still the greatest nation in the world. And I'm so thankful to be an American. So if you could please do a Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I would like to, I will have the MC, Dr. Newland, introduce the participants in this great discussion. I think it is very important for us to have an open dialogue and a plan of action regarding the issues that are sometimes very difficult for us to deal with, such as race. And I think there's nothing wrong with having that discussion. And I think that there's nothing wrong focusing on the issues that affect a particular community. I was surprised. My office received a complaint from a constituent who said that for us to hold this event is very racist. And, you know, to be a leader, you must be able to face criticism. Being a leader is not a title, it's having courage, and courage to take that criticism. And there is nothing wrong, I believe, frankly, to focus on the issues of Black Americans. Because when you help and focus on Black Americans, you help all Americans.
That's correct.
Yep, that's right.
And especially when we look at the history that African Americans have faced in this country, and specifically here in Nassau County, where at one point in Levittown it was prohibited by racial covenants to sell property to African Americans. We've come a long way. And I think this is a great nation. And just because we're discussing our issues with race does not mean that we are ashamed of this country. We just want to make it better. That is patriotism, truly. And so I don't want to speak much because I think that far more smarter people here who will be speaking to you, people who I've respected for a long time, like Elaine Gross, who I've always wanted to work with in some respect. We have our great police officers from the Nassau County Police Department. Thank you very much. Commissioner Ryder could not be here because he's at a game in Rhode Island for his child in college, but he sent his best and brightest. They're going to be discussing recruitment issues in the police department, what the police department is doing to recruit officers of color, minority officers. I wanted to hold this event because I want there to be a barometer for us to assess whether things are getting better for communities of color, African Americans, Blacks in Nassau County. Are things getting worse or are they getting better? What efforts, for example, is the police department doing to recruit more officers of color? What efforts is the health department doing to address issues of health that we see a proportional greater impact upon the African American community, such as diabetes, for example? And I'm very glad to have the Commissioner of Health here, Dr. Eisenstein. Thank you very much for being here. I appreciate the full cooperation of all layers of government who want to be part of this very important discussion. I anticipate the Controller, Jack Schneerman, who has a report that shows that Nassau County is still segregated. That's amazing that our leaders are recognizing these issues that sometimes our leaders feel that are too taboo to discuss. Recently, I was appointed to be the the ranking member of the Minority Affairs Committee. I want to recognize Mr. Jack Profit, who helped to create that department and helped to advocate that to be part of the county charter. We need to create a meaningful minority affairs department so that our businesses in the minority community have a fair chance in getting government contracts and being part of the system. It's like a game of Monopoly, everyone, where one player has been going around that board 200 times. And that other player hasn't even got a chance to get past Illinois Avenue. We're going to make that department a meaningful department. And I thank you for your persistence in making sure that your child has an opportunity to succeed. We're currently making sure that the department has the resources it deserves. I want to thank the county executive for her efforts, Laura Curran, County Executive Laura Curran. And I'm going to say this on the record today. There's a new reassessment system, okay? And a lot of politicians don't want to touch it. They don't want to claim credit for it, right? Because if taxes go up, then they're going to blame that person. But ladies and gentlemen, under the Mangano administration, we had a tax assessment system that had a very bad impact upon communities of color. Right here in Elmont, for example, we had homes valued $400,000, but they're paying $15,000 in taxes. But you could have a millionaire with a home on the North Shore with a home valued at $2 million, and they're only paying $30,000. That home in Elmont is paying more than their fair share. With the new reassessment, it's more accurate. And half people got a reduction, half people got an increase. But at least it's more fair, where people are not paying more than their fair share. And so no politicians want to touch this issue. But I give credit to the county executive for doing that. And I lobbied to her. In fact, there was an article dated March 22nd in the Herald, in which I explained why the prior system was bad for communities of color. It is no coincidence that the former mayor of Hempstead, Mayor Hall, who I have great respect for, initiated a class action lawsuit against the administration for turning a blind eye on a system that had a disparate racial impact upon our communities of color. Very thankful to be here. I'm very thankful for everyone to be here. We're recording this. We're going to put this on YouTube so that people can study these issues. I'm looking for us to advance, to move forward. Dr. Newland will be, we're not just going to talk about our problems. We're going to talk about solutions here today, ladies and gentlemen. So without further ado, and I want to thank the controller who's here, Jack Schneerman. Thank you for coming. Wow, let's give a round of applause for our controller. We have our controller here, Jack Schneerman, and we have our health commissioner. This is great. Thank you. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Newland, who will introduce our panelists. And I'm looking forward to a fruitful discussion. We will have a question and answer period. And I ask you, please respectfully, to not attack the visionary, but the vision. Let's have a respectful discussion, okay? Let's not attack the dreamer, but the dream, okay? If you have an issue, don't criticize someone that they're, they said something racist. No, let's have a fruitful discussion and let's make something of this. I believe words are powerful, and if we put power and meaning to words, we could use them in a plan of action to make our community better. Last, I want to recognize a community leader who does so much for the Elmont community, who is an organizer, who has done programs to help young ladies gain etiquette, and does a lot of programs with our young people. Ms. Cheryl Lee, thank you so much for all of the great work in Elmont. I think the younger generations in Elmont have learned from the older generations, and we're passing the torch of leadership, because the true test of leadership is not carrying the torch, but passing it along. So without further ado, Dr. Newland, thank you so much.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It certainly is my pleasure to be here. 2 years ago is the first time that Legislator Solages with his colleagues, Legislator Abrahams and Fino, came together and had in this location a dialogue on the state of Black Nassau County. And at that time, there were several different organizations and panelists that were doing a body of work. And so some of those organizations are with us again today and some are not. But I think, as Legislator Solage said, we're going to have a conversation. So I invite you in a conversation that goes both ways, right? So you're going to hear some things and you should also be able to say some things. So I'm hoping that in our time together, we'll be able to recognize a lot of the issues that we're going to bring attention to are critical issues. But anytime there's a critical issue, if you kind of understand the way things operate, you're going to be impacted. So So you might personally be impacted by something that's said. Our communities are impacted by some of the realities and some of the systems where we see disparities. Just think about it, the systems that we have represented here and that we're going to be talking about, school system, and we know there are disparities there. We call that the achievement gap. Right, where some students don't have access to internet and to tablets and to things and resources that are so central to their learning process. And then we'll be addressing issues that are, if we think about our health system, our Commissioner of Health is here, disparities there, health disparities, disproportionate amounts of persons of color who are dealing with maybe not having the proper access to healthy foods and choices and programming that would allow for their health and the sustainability of their health to be able to move forward and to be advanced. And look at our justice system. We have members, hopefully, that'll be joining us from the Amistad Black Bar Association here on Long Island. We see mass incarceration, disproportionate numbers of people who are incarcerated, and inequities with regard to some of our sentencing practices. So every system, right, has some aspect of an inequality. And so we have to move the conversation from looking at injustices to really forcing an equity agenda. So you're going to hear some things about equity across the lines of race. You're going to hear some things in reference to initiatives within the police department, initiatives within our community. My topic is going to focus a bit on strategies for individual and community well-being, because after you hear some things here, you're going to be like, oh, you might kind of feel a little heavy, with some of these issues that you take on. Advocates that are in the trenches of doing this work, hopefully they're taking care of themselves and rejuvenating themselves for this struggle, because as they say, the struggle is real. But we want to recognize that realities are things that can be managed. We can understand them. So some of the things that you'll hear today and that I challenge you to learn about even more after today will really be able to give us a community prepared for being able to move forward in an agenda that's going to meet some of our needs more equitably. Have people seen, and I wish I thought to arrange for this image to be here, but there's been an image that has been circulating for the last few years that talks about equity versus equality. Have some of you seen that image? And so for those of you who may not have seen that image, I want you to think, a while ago we were talking about equality. We wanted equal access, and equality is an important word and we should be dealing with that, but we moved to frame our thinking around equity. So equity says if I'm, I'm not quite 6 feet tall, I'm only 5'10", let's say there's a 6-foot fence. So I can't see over a 6-foot fence because I'm 5'10", right? I might need to be on my tippy toes, I might need a little help. So my stool maybe is 6 inches. Somebody who's standing next to me, though, they may be 5'5". They need a stool also, but they don't need a 6-inch stool. They need a stool that's maybe about 1.5 feet, right, to help them to see. And then someone who is maybe 6'4" doesn't need a stool at all. Right? So we recognize that there's a need to give something to assist people that is the same thing. We all need a stool. So let's not say the 6'4" person. Maybe the person who's a little shorter and needs a higher stool. We all need stools to see over the fence, but my stool can be a little shorter, someone else's can be a little taller, and someone else can be even taller than that. That way we all get what we need to be at the same level. Make sense? Yes. So when we move from talking about equality to talking about equity, we want people to really understand the difference in that concept and make sure that we are putting resources and efforts and initiatives into things that are going to advance that agenda. So I want to ask our panelists to come up to the head table here, if you wouldn't mind, and I will introduce you as you come and give you your guidelines with regards to how we should be speaking. The commissioner is here as well, Jack Schneerman. The controller, I'm sorry. Is he?
Yeah,
he stepped out? Okay, so he'll come join us. Commissioner Dr. Lawrence Eisenstein, Commissioner of Nassau County Department of Health. Let's give him a round of applause. To this program, yes. Okay, good to see you again, Commissioner. Elaine Gross, the President of Erase Racism. Teresa Sanders, who is the Executive Director of the Urban League of Long Island, representing the state of Black Long Island State Council. Phil Andrews, the President of the Long Island African American Chamber of Commerce, who is joining us. And William Moss, who's the founder of Black Long Island, the Facebook group. If you're not on it, you should be on it. He's also the president of the High School NAACP and the director locally of the Academic Affairs, Director of Academic Affairs for the Lawrence Unified School District, Union Free School District. and as we mentioned, our controller, Jack Schneerman, is here as well. So thank you so much for everyone. I do believe we have panelists, but what we'll do is we'll shift there in the front. We have from Nassau County Police Department, Officer Ahmed Kespa. You want to just stand up and wave to the people from the community affairs. And Officer Galinsky Jean, who is with the 4th Precinct. Thank you so much. So I'm going to call up, now as a moderator, so I have a charge, right? So I have to be able to introduce people, keep them to a certain time frame, but also facilitate and move the discussion. So I'm going to ask that we would hold questions until after, each panelist, and then we'll have an opportunity for dialogue. But think about what your questions are, and in the interest of time, because the controller needs to leave early, we're going to ask him to come first. We'll engage in some discussions after his presentation, and then we'll continue on with the panelists. Is that all right?
Yes.
All right, is everyone okay? I mean, see a little energy now. Let me see a little energy. Okay. Okay, that's a little better. So with that, now we appreciate it and look forward as we hear from Controller Jack Schneerman. Yes, we have one.
Let's give a round of applause to our controller.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Legislator Solages, for putting together this absolutely terrific day. I'm Jack Schneerman. I am your Nassau County Controller, and I'm excited to be with you today to talk a little bit about the latest report that our office has put out. We put together a unit of policy and data analysis just a few months ago, and we put out several reports so far, one of which was our demographic profile, and just a few weeks ago we put out our Black Economic Equity study regarding Nassau County, and it's gotten a lot of attention, so I'm excited to share with you some of the highlights of it. And there's copies of the report here for folks, and I see that it is up there as well. So I will give you just the sort of the highlights version. So I don't think I need to tell anybody here in the room that we have some issues in Nassau County regarding equity. What's helpful about our report, and one of the things I think it does a good job of doing, is that it puts a number to the issue, and then when you see the number, it really grabs you and makes you stop and think. So that number is $24 billion with a B, $24 billion. Research highlighted in an equity profile of Long Island by PolicyLink and the Urban League of Long Island shows that Long Island's economy could have been nearly $24 billion stronger in 2014 if racial gaps in income were eliminated. And those are the gaps that we were just talking about, the gaps in income, but also the gaps in education. And these are the things that we as a county need to grapple with, and we need to fix, because it's costing all of us money, and it's just plain old unfair. So I think we can all agree that it's got to be about pushing some of these issues forward so that we're making Nassau County a better place to live, work, and raise a family, and we're living up to the standards that I think we all expect. And it tells me that we need to come together and have conversations exactly like the one that we're having today, and so I congratulate everybody for being here and for committing to being part of this kind of dialogue that we need so badly in the county. And that through these sort of conversations, we can set an agenda of change and reform and move forward together along that path so we get where we need to be. It's no secret that this county looks much different than the suburb that defined Nassau County for generations. We speak more languages. We come from more cultural backgrounds than ever before. Our demographic report identified trends that project Long Island will become minority within the next 15 years. And so I thought it was important, as we're here in Elmont, which is really a wonderful case study in the sort of diversity that we see in Nassau County, to break those numbers down a little further and highlight for you a little bit of some of where the population comes from, and I think that some folks have had a fun time sort of needling each other over where those numbers are. We see that the Haitian population tops the charts a little bit. I had a feeling Legislator Solages would enjoy that. followed closely by the Jamaican population, the Guyanese, and so on from there. So that just gives us a little sense of who we are and delves into the flavor a little bit more in a little bit greater detail. So there's some big things on the horizon for Nassau County, and I think it's important to mention it's up to local government. And when I say local government, I don't just mean those of us in government. I look around the room and I say those of us in the nonprofit sector, those of us doing the advocacy, those of us in the community. It's up to all of us to continue moving things forward and sort of trying to find, and this is where my office comes in, trying to find some ways for us to operate a little bit more efficiently and effectively so that we all can get the services that we need. And by pointing these numbers out, we point out that it is incumbent upon those of us in government to recognize that it is no longer okay for us to do business the way we did 50 years ago. We have to modernize. But it's also no longer okay for us to do business acting as if we have the population that we did 50 years ago. That is part of modernization. It is part of making sure that we are delivering the services that are needed to who they are needed by at the time that they are needed by. And that is some, frankly, we have some work to do as a county in order to live up to that. So we can't ignore the reality of the racial economic gap in Nassau. And this inequity is a threat to all of Nassau County. And I think that's one of the things that I want to highlight out of the report, that inequity creates a threat to everybody. And we are truly stronger when we are together. So these are some real challenges for our communities. And I think we have to accept the fact that we should not be in a place where our zip code is determining what our potential is, and our zip code is determining, as we are facing in the county, what our taxes are as well. And that is part of building a stronger, more equitable county. As we build, we've got to continue to fight for all of our communities to always have a seat at the table and a voice in the discussion. A key component of that, as reflected in the report, is MWBE, Minority and Women Business Enterprise. And that's something that we highlight in the report as a real opportunity for improvement. We see that the amount of black-owned businesses in Nassau County are at 12,370. The minority-owned businesses, 44,392. But our MWBE program in Nassau County has a lot of room for improvement. The major piece here, and the piece that we are rallying community support, and this is no surprise to our legislator who has really voiced these issues for a period of years, is that the county needs to do what's called a disparity study. And that's what will help us move forward. The last time it was done was 2003. And as our report shows, the county's changed a lot over the last 15, 16 years. So we've got to up it. And I was really heartened to hear that the legislators are going to be standing up in our capital program and making sure that a disparity is included this year. And that is really, really good news. So this work speaks directly to the economic inequities that communities are facing here in Nassau County and how it harms our local economy. Before I finish, I want to mention two more points along these lines. The first is, as we talk about who we are as a county, and that's what our report does, one critical piece is missing, which is the census is coming. And we live in a county that is considered a hard-to-count county. This is a community that has historically been a hard-to-count community. And it is so important that we are counted through the census, because that's how we get our fair share from the federal government. That's how we make sure we get the representation we need in Washington, in Albany, in Mineola, and so on and so forth. And if we are not counted, we can't get the resources that we need and deserve. So that's critical. There's an effort underway to make sure that we have a good count in the census. There'll be job opportunities for folks to help go door to door. So I would ask everybody in the room to spread that word, because all the studies show that an effective count is much has a much better chance if the person knocking on your door is someone you know or someone from your community, and someone who who lives in the same world, and not somebody who you say, whoa, what do you want, right? Like people don't like getting their doors knocked on the way they did 50, 60 years ago in any event, right? We live in a different world. And a lot of this will be done online as well. So make sure that the word gets out about the census. Make sure that folks know that those jobs are going to be available. And while we're talking about getting our fair share out of government, I will put a plug in as I close for the county's first ever open checkbook that we put online. My office is very proud to do so just a few weeks ago. The website is opencheckbook.nassaucountiny.gov, and it's a wonderful way to literally you can look on a website just the way you look at your own finances. You can see what you're spending and where your bank account is going. So too now can we see what the county is spending its money on, and it is all of our money, and we need to be holding the county accountable, and that's the way that we do it. So these are some important things. I'm so proud that we can bring these things to the forefront and help arm the discussion so we can help move things forward and make some positive change. Thank you again for inviting me today. Please do take a look at the report. Please consider sharing it on your social media as well to help get the word out about it. And I look forward to continuing the conversation. I'm happy to answer any questions in the meantime. Thank you so much.
Any questions before he leaves? Because he does need to leave us. But just think about that idea. I think the transparency in the open checkbook. I hope y'all go to that website. I am going to check it out. How many people want to check it out?
Yep.
See where the county funds, how they're being utilized, get a better sense of that. So in continuing with the idea of the inequalities and the need for equity, and we're going to bring up the next panelist. I'm going to ask that Teresa Sanders would come. You heard the comptroller mention the Urban League's report that was an initiative with the Urban League of Long Island and Policy Link, and we have a State of Black Long Island Equity Council, of which I'm a proud member. There are a few other members here. If you're a member of the council, Alicia Barvin from Probation is here, who's on our council, and Elaine Gross is on our council as well. And I'm saying our because we're doing a lot of work collectively. So Ms. Sanders is going to share a bit about the work, how that group came together, what some of the issues are. But just think about Long Island, all of Long Island, not Black Long Island, all of Long Island, missing out on economic growth, $24 billion. You might wonder, how do we even get to that number? How do we understand that? What does that mean? And what do we do? And please know that the work of this council is looking into those issues. So with that now, Teresa Sanders.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Just a little context in terms of why these reports are so important. The Urban League, during its founding as a national organization, was founded in 1910 when freed slaves were coming from the South and moving to northern cities. It was important when they got to these northern cities for them to understand how to connect their lives to, number one, freedom, and then how do you train, what kind of education access, housing access, health care. There were so many needs to be met that the Urban League was founded to help with this transition, and some of us that study history know that was the Great Migration period. So now you have all of these people of color living in these cities, and we had to figure out a way, not only to say, well, the condition's bad and what are we going to do about it, but to hold people accountable. And who do you hold accountable? And how do you hold them accountable? You can have an argument, you can yell and you can scream, but at the end of the day, if people are still suffering, you didn't do anything. You really didn't do anything at all. And then you come back next week and you do the same thing. So the State of Black America report was started in the 1900s. And what that document did, it was a data-driven report that helped measure whether or not there was improvement achievement within the Black community. It measured education progress and health progress, etc. One of the key things that came out of that during the Civil Rights era was the partnerships between corporate America and corporate responsibility, because they were making a lot of money out of the Black community, and their civic and social responsibility back to those very communities. And so the data in these reports were used to measure, how you doing? Are you doing a good job? So how many Black people did you hire? And when you see some of these current movies that are coming out, Hidden Figures, etc., there was details behind all of that success. And there were hundreds of other people that there's no movie about them, but that made progress. Maybe they were the first Black teacher in a school building, and we still got that on Long Island. We were just talking about that in the building. But they're still the first, and we're still encountering that in 2019. So this work in terms of equity is so very important, because if we look at our history as a country, we can see when people are collectively making progress, it's a more productive nation. It really is balanced on what the foundational ideals were with the founding fathers. Even though there were some things written into our Constitution that excluded Black people, what we did is advocate. And when we advocated during the Civil Rights era, it wasn't just Black people advocating. There were a lot of people that didn't even look like us that were advocating, because they knew if you can treat one part of the community bad, sooner or later, everybody's going to be treated bad. And so we only need to look today, some of the models that we're pulling out, and Lisa described it, Dr. Newman, excuse me, I use your formal title. She described it because one of the things that we're doing with the Solages group is that we've got all these thought leaders around the table, and that helps to get to the solution model. We've been trained on a solution model by Policy Link. Some of this stuff is not new. It may be new to us on Long Island, how to use it and to implement it. But the solution-based model means that you identify the issues in your data, but now the leadership has to understand, so these are the solutions. And you bring in content experts. A quick call to action is that we are still looking for additional content experts to serve in our action teams. Many of the leaders sitting in this room co-chair action teams. So they have their own meetings. They're coming up with solution models for how do we get more people. For example, there's a stigma for being a police officer. But how do we get to our community? That's our responsibility. You know, it's great to have the police officers come in and talk, but the community has to be responsible. We have to talk to young people about why this is a career path. We have to listen to them when they tell us there's a stigma they don't want to apply. And then we have to break that down as to why. You know, do you know how much money you can be making in a couple of years and living here local and serving your community? And sometimes that dialogue has to go back and forth, because a lot of our young people have not had positive experiences with dealing with the police. But then we put the ownership back on them. So, but if you become the police officer, the experience may change, not only for you, but your community. So these are some of the action items that we're trying to get to. And again, the model is a solution-based model. I welcome all of you to join us. And then just one last thing, back to that $24 billion. That is so real. And when I try to explain to people, well, how did you get to that number? In the data in the report, and you can get it off of the Urban League's website, you can see the full report. But for every young kid that's undereducated, so they don't really read well, they can't articulate themselves, they have poor social skills, that's going to be a person that grows up and may not be able to get a living wage job. Y'all all know you need a living wage job on Long Island. And living wage for Long Island, too, right? Living wage for Long Island is so different than the rest of the nation. So, you know, you have to have an income of a good 80 grand, and that's if you buy yourself living in your parents' basement. And so as you start to look at our numbers on Long Island, it's very unique, but also it's achievable. There is opportunity. And if we work together, we can close that. So thank you very much. I'll be here for questions, right?
I would like to just recognize I would just like to recognize Mr. Michael Hamid, President of the Elmont School Board. Thank you so much for your dedication to our children. It is not a coincidence that with your leadership, our children go on to great schools and do very well. Thank you very much. And I would also like to recognize Lodi from the local Pakistani newspaper and one of my brothers from the mosque. And I'd like to recognize someone who's not here, but would have been here, Farah Mazwala, who works in the Minority Affairs Office. It's no coincidence that our brothers in the Muslim community are here, because they share our pain, but also they share our history of prevailing. I must say that in Nassau County there is a significant amount of Islamophobia which has to be addressed. And I'm thankful for this community that we're working together to address these issues, so thank you for being here. As they say in the Holy Quran, God helps those who help themselves. And so that's what we're doing here today, we're helping ourselves. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you.
One quick pause. So we want to thank our media partners who are here, so FIOS as well as Newsday. Thank you for being able to be here and document some of this. How many of you know we have to tell our stories multiple different ways, right? So we have an oral tradition that's kind of been rich in Black American culture and Caribbean culture, and it's important for us to share the stories. So there's some empty seats here, but you're going to fill those empty seats when you talk to other people, and they'll be able to get the information and it'll move on. So we're thankful for that, and so we just have to pause to make sure they had our list of speakers. All right, so now we've heard some things with regard to the need to examine equity, to understand the impact of inequity, and now Elaine Gross does a yeoman's job with regard to the work of forwarding anti-racist agenda in different areas, in our housing system, in our school system. And so there was a series of discussions that were going on in our communities on how to build a just Long Island, and Elaine Gross is going to come and share that topic with us at this time. Ms. Gross? And I just have to plug that she comes, the fact that we share a common profession, we share a few different organizations that we work with, so I just wanted to recognize her for her work that she does with Malloy College. She's on the doctoral advisory board for our EDD program, which is the doctorate in education, and so many other connections. So thank you for representing those issues as well.
Good afternoon, everyone. So how many of you might have attended one of the 5 forums, How Do We Build a Just Long Island? There was one in Nassau over at Hofstra. So a few of you. And our focus there was to talk about something called structural racism. And I'm going to give you a definition for that, but first let me begin by saying that the organization that I run, Erase Racism, has been around since 2001. And our focus has always been looking at institutional and structural racism, not so much what individuals happen to say or do, or the issues that are impacting one person, but issues that are impacting a whole population of people. And so, next slide, please. We know that institutional racism is what happens when you talk about the policies and practices in one institution. But this little diagram related to structural racism tries to capture the idea that there is a cumulative and compounding effect of history, culture, the interconnections between various institutions, various kinds of policies and laws, etc. Then you have a system that routinely produces racialized outcomes. Next slide. So I wanted to give you this one quick snapshot of Long Island to show you the tremendous fragmentation, government fragmentation that we have here. People in other parts of the country can't believe these numbers, especially our public school education numbers, 125 school districts. Next slide. And so that fragmentation makes it difficult to deal with any of the issues that we will be and have been talking about here today. I wanted to also, while I'm giving a snapshot, give a snapshot of our racial diversity, which is, we have become more racially diverse, and in Nassau County you see we're about 60% white, 12% black, 17% Hispanic or Latinx, at 10% Asian, and 1% other. Thank you. Next slide. So what does structural racism look like on Long Island? And we already had a few comments. I'm not going to go into it in detail, but if you've heard the history of Levittown, next slide, and the fact that not only could African Americans, not only were they denied access initially, next slide, but things like racial covenants in the deeds, and the fact that you didn't have access to the federal government guaranteed mortgage loans, along with bank redlining, racial steering, blockbusting, and if you don't recognize some of those terms, ask me about it. But those things historically made Long Island one of the most racially segregated metropolitan regions in the country. Next slide. And so we come to now, and we're in the top 10 most racially segregated regions. And I could, if we had more slides, I could put all of them up to let you know that we still have issues around housing segregation, for example. Not only has racism been successful with a couple of lawsuits, one in Nassau, one in Suffolk, where either the management company or the owners are still engaging in, if a black person comes, in this case we were looking at rentals, no, we don't have any vacancies. A white person comes, yes, we do have vacancies, let me show you them, here's the application, we'd love to have you come. And then I just wanted to let you know, also in financial institutions, same thing. And the last one is worth mentioning because when you're talking about structural racism, frequently, unless you are educated to recognize it, you don't even know that it's happening. So the Department of Justice went after the town of Oyster Bay, and they had a housing policy which said, if you already live in the town, then you can access the below market rate housing in the town of Oyster Bay. However, the number of people in the town of Oyster Bay that look like me is very small. And what the Department of Justice said was, you are creating a racially disparate impact through your housing policy. You are discriminating. You're basically saying that black people who live right next door, who could be eligible for this housing, are not allowed to apply. And so that is structural racism. Nobody is standing at the border with a sign that says, you know, don't bother to come in because you're not going to be able to access the housing. They don't have to do that. The policy doesn't. Next slide, please. So very much related, and someone mentioned this, that your zip code determines a lot of things, including where you get to go to school. And we did some research that looked at, between 2004 and 2016, looked at what's happening to the school districts, because we do know that we have become more diverse. And during that period, we discovered that the number of students that are attending not only majority minority school districts, but intensely segregated school districts, meaning 90 to 100% non-white. The number of students attending those districts tripled. So people are saying, oh, things are getting much better, we're going in the right direction. We're not going in the right direction in terms of segregation. We're going in the wrong direction. Next slide, please. And another way to look at that is actually the number of school districts. Again, during that 12-year period, going from 5 intensely segregated to 11. Next slide. I pulled out this slide because I thought it might be interesting to look at, because there are a number of reports that are coming out now talking about taxes, unfair taxes, etc. And one of the things that I've heard a lot over the years is, well, African Americans don't really care about education. They would tax themselves more if they really cared about education. This slide from the Long Island Index, which now that I've found it this week, I will try to get the Fiscal Policy Institute to update the data. But I don't think that things have changed a lot. So what the Fiscal Policy Institute did was to say, if you want to increase revenues by $250 per student, how much would you have to increase taxes in all of the different districts? And so you're not going to see the 125 names, you don't have to see it. But what you can know is that at the very top, you only have to increase taxes by $1.72. That's Shelter Island. At the very bottom, Fire Island. At the very bottom, we have Brentwood, Wyandanch, Hempstead, and Roosevelt, with very different levels of how much you would have to increase the taxes. So at the bottom of the scale, it's over $325 in order to increase that same $250 more per student. Now, it's a very complex analysis that they had to do because this depends on the number of students in the district, the amount of wealth in the district, whether or not you have other kinds of taxes in the district, etc. Next slide, please. But this helps make it a little clearer because just as a few examples, holding solid the number of students so that someone isn't saying, well, I know there's a difference and it's because you have fewer students there, you have more students in another district. So holding solid the number of students and also looking at the New York State defined need level. So the top in these pairs, which are essentially saying these districts are similar. They have a similar number of students, and then when you look at the need, the top one is a 3, which is a high need district, and the bottom one is a 6, which is a low need district. So in Wyandanch, for example, 254 students at the time, 3 meaning a high need. The tax increase would have been $314.39. For Locust Valley, same number of students with a low need district, the tax increase would have been $47.81 to get that same $250 more per student. You following me here?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, this is not simple, but it is structural, and that's what I'm trying to get across. Next slide, please. So this is what our school districts look like right now. And again, it's not necessary for you to see individual school districts. But what you'll see there is there are some districts that have a lot of orange or red and yellow. And that's Black and Hispanic, Latinx. And then there are some districts which have a lot of blue. And again, this is a